Hello and welcome back to Bedtime with Mama. Tonight we are reading Chapter 15 of the Double Trouble Society. Chapter 15 is Flying. Now, Amethyst said, the blue moon is tonight and we need a plan. All the grown-ups in Crowwood Peak will be preparing for the festival, which makes it a bit harder for us. Why? Asked Maggie. Well, I told Max and Bill that you and Ivy were my nieces visiting from far away. If I said that about all of you, that would mean I would have about 40 brothers and sisters. Perhaps you run a summer school, Ivy suggested. It isn't summer, Eddie said, still staring into his book. Then an autumn school, Maggie offered. There's no such thing, Eddie said, sounding tired of their suggestions. Well, what's your idea then, if you're so clever? Maggie said with her hands on her hips. How about an orphanage? Eddie said as he glanced up from his book. An icy chill seemed to still the room. No one wanted to think about the possibility that their parents might never remember them. Where would that leave them? I think a school is a great idea, Ivy. This is a school for gifted students who have excelled in different areas and have been sent to me for tutoring. Amethyst was trying her best to be warm to the children's spirit and distract them, but they remained quiet and looked downcast. Children, I know this is bleak. Maybe the breakfast situation you have found yourself in so far, or maybe the bleakest situation you have found yourself in so far. But I promise you, we will do everything we can to try and defeat the witch. As long as we stick together, we will find a way through this, no matter what. Jemima opened her mouth, having momentarily forgotten she had no voice to make any more quips. Okay, class, Amethyst said with a pointed smile at Ivy and Maggie. Let's put our heads together. Tell me all about this festival. Let's leave no stone unturned. Well, Maggie began, there are toffee apples, cookies, and honeycombs covered in chocolate. There are also these biscuits. Oh, the biscuits, she whispered, momentarily lost in thought. Very helpful, Maggie, but anything you can tell me about that isn't food? Amethyst squeezed Maggie's shoulder and gave her a reassuring smile. We light candles and put them in the windows to guide the souls of the taken children back home to Crowwood Peak, said Isaac. The people who now live in the houses those 12 children once lived in make their homes brighter than everyone else's by putting lanterns in the garden and stringing fairy lights around the front door. Everyone wears emerald green, the color of the first Archuous witch's hair before it turned black, in the hope that the curse can be lifted and she can return to the person she was before, explained Jennifer. Amethyst shook her head, her mouth hanging open, unable to believe that the tragedy has sparked such a tradition. All the parents in the village recite the names of their own children to prove that they haven't forgotten. Well, been forgetting. Ivy's voice faded away as she realized that her parents wouldn't be able to recreate that particular tradition this year. So our parents are going to be asked to recite the names of their children, and not one parent is going to have a thing to say? Won't anyone think that's weird? Isaac asked. I'm sure Emerald has found a way to wipe that particular tradition from everyone's mind, Amethyst said, sighing. Don't forget the stones, Maggie added. This was her favorite part, the 12 round the house, she gulped, including the one we moved. We stand in a circle round the house, and 12 children from Crowwood Peak read out the names of the lost children and to honor their memory, Ivy explained. And there's the salt, Darla said. The salt, darling? What salt? Amethyst hoisted little Darla and her unicorn up on her lap, and Darla gave a gleeful giggle. She means the salt we use to draw the circle around this house, Ivy said. Why on earth would you do that? Amethyst asked, laughing. To make sure no evil gets out, Maggie said, as if that were not only an obvious answer, but an answer of which most certainly knew. But that's not what salt circles are for. They're meant to draw a circle of salt around something in order to protect it, so that no evil gets in. Are you telling me all these years we've been protecting the Crowwood Witch from anything else evil getting to her? Ivy let her head fall into her lap, or into her hands with a slap. The salt circle was pointless then. Not entirely, Amethyst said. You protected my sister from any demons who might have wanted to free her from her feline form. All this chaos would have happened long before I got here to help if you hadn't been drawing circles around the house every moon. Does that make you feel any better? Ivy nodded. It does, actually. Anyway, a salt circle might not be a bad idea for us tonight. A bit of salt? Is that really enough to stop an evil witch? Jennifer asked, reaching up to her tiptoes and opening the cupboards to find some salt. She found a red canister that had salt on it in big white writing and threw it over to Amethyst. Amethyst placed the salt on the table. Thank you, and yes, it'll take a lot more than a salt circle, she sighed, but I don't believe my sister is entirely evil. Not yet, anyway. Whoa, hang on a second. You're telling me that this is your sister when she isn't entirely evil? Maggie gasped, pointing furiously out the window to the mountain. She can get worse than this? I'm afraid so. She won't be entirely evil until her deal with the demon is complete. Until then, there is a tiny little bit of good left in her heart. That's incredibly hard to believe, Eddie said dryly from behind his book. But maybe that's the key to this. A warm silence fell into the air of the kitchen. What do you mean? Amethyst asked slowly, not wanting to scare away this newly forming idea. Look here. Eddie thumped a book down on the table entitled Buds for Duds. I've been reading about a certain kind of flower that is almost impossible to destroy. You're not filling me with confidence here, Eddie. Maggie put her elbow on her shoulder and leaned in to look at the page he'd opened. There was a diagram of a wilted, almost dead flower. I'm not saying the witch will be impossible to kill, he rolled his eyes impatiently. If you'd let me finish. I was going to say that this flower is so hard to kill because if there is even a tiny bit of life left inside, it will cling on to that life until someone comes along and gives it water and sunlight and helps it thrive. It could be withered and brown without a petal or green leaf in sight, but as long as there's still a little scrape of vitality left in it, you can bring it back from the brink of death. Eddie looked up, expecting everyone to be beaming at him with joy. So? Maggie finally broke the silence. Eddie sighed. What if it's the same with your sister, Amethyst? If you're right, and there is still a tiny little sliver of goodness in her heart of the Crowwood Witch, maybe there's a way to access it, to draw it out of her and make it glow, and make it grow, to bring her back from the brink of darkness. Eddie shrugged, his eyes moving from left to right across the pages, still reading as he spoke. He seemed to have an old soul. It was as if he was a very wise 80-year-old who had seen the entire world and read 1,000 books, trapped inside the body of a 12-year-old. But how? There's so much darkness in there. How do we draw out that chink of light? Ivy asked. Eddie closed the book, then looked directly at Ivy, which made her cheeks feel hot. You find the things that make her happy, and that used to make her happy. My sister is only happy when she's inflicting pain, Amethyst said. Is there nothing from your time together as children that you shared an interest in? Something that made you both equally as happy as each other? Amethyst was quiet for a moment, and then another, until she was lost in thought entirely. She had very few good memories of her sister, but the ones she did have were all of the same thing, flying. She could practically feel the wind rushing through every strand of her hair, the warmth of her sister's body as they held tightly on with their arms around Emerald's waist. Her cheek pressed against the space between her shoulder blades, and she could almost hear Emerald's sharp laugh ringing out into the night. A real laugh, not a cackle, filled with joy instead of malice. In that moment, she knew what would draw out the goodness in Emerald's heart. Flying, she finally said, returning her gaze to the room. We used to fly broomsticks. Emerald was always headstrong and unruly and full of her own opinions and would fight with our parents. After every fight they had, she'd take my hand, hoist me on the back of her broom, and off we'd go, far higher than we could fly just on our own, and much further too. It was like leaving the world and all our cares behind. everything melted away above the clouds. It was just us up there together. That was what mattered. The children listened to Amethyst, and as she spoke, it was as if they were on a broomstick with her and Emerald. When we touched down on solid ground again, she wouldn't say much. She simply looked at me and smiled. And I had this warm feeling right in the center of my chest. We were twin sisters, and we would always be twin sisters, no matter what tried to come between us. But then, she fell under the spell of the curse and ran away. Amethyst wiped away a tear and gave a little teeter of embarrassment. I don't know if she still feels the same about flying now, or about me for that matter. After all, I'm the one who turned her into a cat and locked her in this house for 300 years. I'm sure she feels resentful. I doubt she'll be my biggest fan. Isn't it worth a try? Ivy begged. But what exactly is the plan here? How do we get her flying? And if we do get her on a broomstick, how do we know she'll enjoy it like she used to? Maggie asked. How did you feel when you were flying, Maggie? Amethyst asked, her lips turning up at the corners, already knowing Maggie's answer. Maggie thought back to when she had been swirling through the air, and how even though there had been an evil witch zooming after her with a knife and a fork ready to feast on her heart, it didn't matter because flying had felt so wonderful. Yeah, okay, fair point. And I haven't even tried a broomstick yet, she nodded at Ivy. It'll definitely work. But we've already seen her flying. She flew to the mountain, remember? Jamie pointed out. I think I need to be with her, Amethyst said, trying to keep the nervous wobble out of her voice. I'll need to get her on a broomstick with me so I can recreate those long, high flights we used to take as sisters. Hopefully that should jog her memory. Isn't that super dangerous? Isaac asked. High in the air with an evil witch with far more magic than I can dream of? Yes, I'd say that fits into the category of super dangerous. Amethyst laughed a little hysterically. But we have no other choice. I don't know how we can make my sister see sense or reason until I can make her remember what life was like before she became this black-hearted monster. We were close before the curse took hold. Best friends, actually. I was always by her side, even when the curse first hit her and her hair turned from green to black. Then one day I woke up and she had gone. Another tear escaped down Amethyst's cheek, but she wiped it away. She had disappeared again into her mind's eye. I sent her thoughts that I knew she could hear, but she never sent anything back. But as time went on, I began to feel drawn to Hokum House. Its magic was calling to me, and I knew it must have meant she had returned here and woken up its magic to fulfill the prophecy of the Crowwood Witch. So I came here and found her, but not as I had known her. She was no longer my sister. She was something else. Why did she come to Hokum House? Maggie asked. Amethyst shrugged. Curses have strange powers. They attach themselves to things that aren't always what was intended. The original curse was put on the first arduous witch in this house, and here the 12 children were taken. And so, when the curse passed on to Emerald, it called her back here, back to take the 13th child at the time of the next blue moon. Oh, good. I'm so glad we're here, then, Maggie mumbled. 2 sisters, fierce and brave and true, Ivy muttered. What? Maggie nudged her with her elbow. The prophecy says that 2 sisters, fierce and brave and true, will be able to defeat the witch. That's you and Emerald. Together you'll be able to defeat the darkness within her, the darkness from the original Crowwood Witch, and stop her from becoming entirely evil. Ivy clapped her hands together, not only extremely excited about the prospect of everything finally being over, but also very pleased that she was able to figure it out. I hope you're right, Ivy. Amethyst rose to her feet, took a long, deep breath, and said, Now, first things first, I'm going to need a broomstick. That is the end of chapter 15. Sweet dreams, my littles. I'll see you again tomorrow night.